Hi, welcome back to Grains in Small Places. My name's Kara. If you're new around here, my channel is focused basically on fresh milled flour, or all things fresh milled flour. And today I'm going to be showing you how we make a beautifully 4-strand braided challah loaf. So let's get started. Okay, so to make this challah loaf, we're going to use, you can use all hard white, you can even use all hard red if that's all you have, but I'm gonna use my little blend. Of course, you know, I love adding a little bit of kamut into almost all of my bakes. So we're just gonna put just a little bit of it on here. I'll make sure to put a link in the description box below for this recipe. It'll have the grams and the volume. If you ever are doing one of my recipes, grams are always going to be more accurate. Everyone scoops just a little bit differently from each other, so when in doubt, use the grams if you can. I also wanted to make note that this is the grain, the hard white and the kamut that we bought from my Azure haul that I made a video on last week. So I've been very happy with that. I will make sure to put a link in the description box below also for these containers. I get a lot of questions about my mill, which I have a coupon code for, I'll put down there as well, and my mixer and all of the things. That way you can check those out. They'll be down in the description box below. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this on over to my mill. This is my Nutrimill Harvest Grain Mill, and I have a coupon code in the description box below where you can grab $20 off anything from Nutrimill or Bosch on their website. Okay, and while you're milling your flour, you can go ahead and weigh out your water. I'm gonna use about 80 grams to start with, which is about 1/3 cup of water. We're gonna be using our Ankerstone mixer today. This kneads dough very nicely, makes a nice, fluffy, tender dough. And everything fits nicely inside of here for storage. I like to just use the roller ball and scraper, but of course you can use the dough hook that it comes with. Some people prefer one or the other. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the water in here. I know it doesn't seem like very much, but challah is a very protein-rich, egg-heavy loaf. So that's going to be a lot of our liquid that we have. And to this, we're gonna add about 1/8 cup of olive oil. You could use avocado oil in place of this if you prefer, or any neutral oils. And then I'm also going to do about 1 tablespoon of honey. So about half of this. If you like it a little sweeter, you could always increase that to 2 tablespoons, which would be the same ratio of oil and honey. And we're also going to do 1 teaspoon of salt. If you like a really salty loaf, you could always increase the amount of salt. And then to this, we're gonna add 3 whole eggs. Some people will use just the egg yolks, or do like 2 eggs and 1 yolk, or you know, all kinds of different variations. But I don't really like to waste the egg whites, so instead of doing like 2 eggs and 2 egg yolks, I'm just going to do 3 whole eggs, and then we'll also be using an egg for the egg wash as well. I'm gonna go ahead and wash my hands. And here is our beautiful freshly milled flour. We'll be putting that in just a moment. I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of mix up these ingredients just a little bit. Doesn't have to be all completely incorporated, because as this is mixing with the flour, it'll continue to mix. Okay, now that we have that plugged in, I'm just gonna kind of give this a little mix of the ingredients in here. Okay, that looks nice and incorporated. So now I'm gonna go ahead and put in my freshly milled flour, and I teach the GISP method. I'll put a link to that article in the description box below to kind of describe the method of why I do what I do and how it helps, and how you get nice fluffy bread results. Just kind of have to forget some of the things that we've learned when baking with white flour. So I went ahead and put that in there. mix all this together. Everything except for the yeast. Okay, and this is making a somewhat small loaf. I'm not looking for a divided loaf here. This is just doing one challah loaf. So if you want two separate loaves or a really, really large loaf, you want to double this recipe. But as you guys know, if you've been watching me for a while, I have a small oven, so I don't really have the option to make a really large loaf. So, and you know, I'm going to place this here while we're doing our autolyze or rest period. That's also mentioned in that GISP method. And we're going to put the yeast in when we come back. We're going to let this rest to let all of that fresh milled flour start absorbing the liquid, soften the bran, and we'll come back in about 15 minutes, 20 minutes or so. It doesn't have to be an exact science. It can go longer than that. And then we'll put our yeast in, and then we will start the kneading process. So we'll be back after that autolyze period. Okay, so now it's been a little over 15 minutes. Time kind of got away from me here. Okay, I'm just going to put this back together, and this is reminding me again to put my yeast in. So I am using instant yeast. I find it gives me the best results for this bread, but if all you have is active dry yeast, then during that autolyze period is when you would need to activate your yeast. So take some of the water out from here, a pinch of sugar, and activate your yeast during that autolyze period. And then that way, when we're putting the yeast in, it's time for you to put your yeast in. It should be nice and foamy. If for whatever reason it doesn't get foamy when you're activating it, then that means there's something wrong with your yeast. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and start the kneading process. Okay, so I can tell by looking at this that this is a little on the drier side. You may be thinking it's a little on the wet side, but I can tell just by the way it's kind of clumping together as it's going around. So I'm gonna add just a little bit more water, not very much because I don't want to overdo it. But remember, fresh milled flour tends to continue to absorb the liquid, so we definitely want to make sure that we are giving it plenty of liquid to do that absorbing. Okay, so I'm going to use probably about 30 more grams of water. I will make sure to adjust that in the written recipe. If there's ever a time that there's a discrepancy between my video recipe and my written recipe is always going to be the correct recipe that you want to go with. So it might take a little minute here for it to mix this water in since I added it after the fact, but so this dough should look nice and soft. It should not be really stiff or really hard. Even if you have a different mixer, you don't want to just keep dumping flour in until it pulls away from the side like we normally would with white flour. We want to make sure that we have this dough starting out much wetter before we start our kneading process because once this continues to knead, and if we had already dumped in a whole bunch of flour, this would be way too dry to get a nice stretchy dough. Okay, so the 12 minutes is up, and I'm rinsing my hands really quick because I want to use nice wet hands or oiled hands so we don't get too sticky. But I can see that my bread dough looks nice and smooth and stretchy, and I'm also noticing that it's somewhat shinier than what it was before. I can lift the entire, big thing of this dough and it wants to stay together. So if you're struggling, you can see I can get nice thin window pane here. If you're struggling with getting your dough right, I do recommend that you check out that GISP method. Again, I'll put a link to that in the description box below, but also we want to make sure that if you are going over and over, we don't want to over knead it. Sometimes it's beneficial, depending on your mixer especially, if you scrape the sides down, flip that dough over and then go back to kneading. But we also want to make sure that we are not using super dry dough. So you can see this still looks very wet. Many people message me saying there's no way that this will come together and be shapeable, but I promise you it is. So I will bring you back. We're going to cover this, let it rise for about an hour. Now, if it's cold in your house, it might take closer to 2 hours, but we want to make sure that it's doubled. It'll look nice and puffy, and that's how we know it's ready for the shaping. Okay, so again, I'm gonna go ahead and spray the bowl and the dough with some oil. You can, of course, just rub the oil on there. And this helps it to not stick to the sides as it's rising. But you can see this is rather a small batch of dough in this mixer, which is why it looks like it's very small amount. But again, we're just making the one loaf. I'm gonna go ahead and put the lid on this. And again, like I said, we're gonna let this rise for about an hour, maybe two if it's cold in your house. So I'll bring you back when it's done rising. Okay, so at the end of the rise, we're gonna go ahead and get an egg wash ready, because actually one of the beauties of this is we're going to actually egg wash this more than once. So I'm gonna egg wash it after. I'm gonna wash my hands. We're going to actually egg wash this right after we shape it, and then egg wash it right before it goes into the oven. So I'm just gonna add just a tiny splash of water into this. And we also have our parchment paper lined baking sheet. So I have that ready to go, because once we braid this, we want to get it right onto the sheet. So today I'm planning on doing a 4-strand braid. And one of my secret tricks is to get some olive oil. Whoop, that might be too much. Whoop. On your hands and on your work surface. So I may have put too much on here, so I'm just going to kind of push this up to the top in case I need any more. Okay, just lightly oil, you don't need that much. So now we have our dough. I guess I should have oiled that after this, but that's okay, we'll wash it. So it's nice and doubled in size. You can see it's much larger than it was. It's nice and puffy. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull this out. And you can see it all wants to stay together. It's gathering nicely. And you can see it's nice and stretchy. I love the richness that these eggs bring. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of consolidate all of this together, and then we're going to break this into, or cut this rather, into 4 equal parts. So if you want this to be perfectly weighed out, you can definitely do that. So I'm just going to eyeball it. So you may get better results if you weigh out your dough pieces. Okay, so what we're going to do first is flatten these, and this is basically our pre-shaping. I'm going to turn these. You see how the dough is wanting to come? Alexa, timer off. You see when I push this how the dough is wanting to come back in? We're just going to continue to fight the fight of these dough strands wanting to come back in over and over. So what I'm going to do is actually pre-shape these into little, I guess, cylinders and let these sit. Okay, and since these are nice and oiled, I think we'll be okay to let these sit for about 10 minutes before we need to continue rolling them out. So I'm just gonna kind of let these sit here. If you want, you can cover these with some saran wrap or something like that, but I've got these pretty heavily oiled, so we'll come right back in about 10 minutes. Okay, I decided I'm gonna go ahead and cover these while they sit, because I really don't want them to dry out. Okay. I'm going to set that to the side. I'm going to get some oil on my hands here. And what we need to do is make these nice long ropes. I don't know, maybe 12 to 16 inches. And they're still wanting to shrink up on me, you can see. So we may have to just allow these to kind of go a little bit longer. Okay, so we want to just kind of roll these. If you encounter any large air bubbles in the dough, just make sure to pop those. Okay. You want to make sure that they're all pretty equal in length and line them all up with each other here. Okay, so now we're going to join all 4 of them up at the top. And I will make sure to put a little bit of information in the blog post about the braiding. This is a 4 braid. You can choose to do a 3 braid, a 6 braid. You could do the braid where you do it in like a little ball, whatever you prefer. So we're just going with the 4 braid. I'm going to try to remember my best. I practiced a few times beforehand. So, okay, so what we're going to do is the first strand here goes to the center. And when we pull these over, we want to make sure that they're not super tight because we don't want too much tension allowing for rising. The far one's going to go over to the edge. It would be helpful if I had a little bit larger workspace here. Okay, I'm just going to pull these apart a little bit better. Then we're going to go with this outside one, put it in the center, and this third one is going to go all the way to the opposite side. Okay. Then this one's going to go into the center. And then this one's going to go to the opposite side. Then on the other side, we're going to go from here to the center, and this one to the outside. Okay. Now we're going to go with this one to the center, and this one to the outside, this one to the center, this one to the opposite outside. Seeing an air bubble, going to give that a pop. Okay, so you can see it looking nice and pretty. I'm running out of space, so I'm going to kind of see if I can move that up. Okay, and we're going to take this one to the center, and this one all the way out. This one to the center, this one all the way out. This one to the center, and this one all the way out. This one to the center, and this one all the way out. So then I get to the center here, or to the end, and I'm going to just kind of push all these together, pop some more air bubbles, and I'm going to just fold that a little bit under my loaf, and I'm going to fold the starting point under my loaf. So there we have that nice beautiful braid. It does get from bigger to smaller. I didn't roll them out perfectly even. I can see that now. But we're going to go ahead and put this on our baking sheet. And actually I'm going to put this kind of at an angle to allow some room for expansion because we want this to get nice and risen. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and egg wash this. We're going to cover it up and we're going to let this rise for 1 to 2 hours. We want it to be nicely risen. We don't want to put this in the oven too soon because then we will have those ripped areas here, which we may end up still getting a little bit of those, but make sure that we have a nice puffy rise. This should be about double. And when we push on it, like right now when I push on it, the dough springs pretty much quickly right back up. So we don't want that. We want it to leave a little bit of an indent, come back a little bit. Now, if we overproof it, we have that issue too, where we push on it and it deflates and then we kind of lost all the work that we did. So, all right, so I'm going in. This is our first egg wash, and we want to make sure we egg wash all the nooks and crannies all the way around to the bottom of the loaf. And then we're going to come back in and we're going to egg wash this a second time before we bake it. So right around the time where it's looking like it's just about done rising, we'll preheat our oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. And we will egg wash this again, and then if you want to put some toppings on there like sesame seeds, which I think that's what I'm going to do, then we can go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go ahead and cover this, and we'll be back after it rises. Okay, so we're going to check to see if this is ready to bake. I'm pushing it in. Do you see how it comes back really slowly, but it doesn't come back all the way? It's not springing directly back right away, so I know we're getting close. So I'm going to go ahead and preheat my oven. Okay, so our 1 hour timer is just about up. I'm going to go ahead. Our oven is almost preheated. I'm going to pull this off. Ooh, I almost ruined my dough there. Got stuck a little bit. Okay, and then it's going to get another egg wash. I know this looks a little wonky how we've got a big and a little, and I probably should have re-rolled and redid it, but I'm going to be honest with you. We were getting ready to eat dinner, and I just had to go ahead and finish that portion and say, I guess I don't care what it looks like. Post down in the comments below if you've ever had days like that before. Okay, we're going to go ahead and put a nice egg washing on this. You can see that it is nice and pillowy. I don't want this to proof much longer because we will be looking at some overproofing. So it's kind of that sweet balance. This is just beautiful, delicate dough. I'm getting a lot of air bubbles coming to the surface. Hopefully that doesn't cause me an issue in baking. But you can see it's starting, I don't know if you can see or not, but when your dough starts to kind of dimple, that means it's pretty much overproof. Our oven is ready. When your dough starts to kind of look dimpled on the outside after the rising, that means it's already pretty much overproof. So you want to get to it before it starts doing any of that dimpling. Look at that silly air bubble. Okay, and I think I'm going to go ahead and dust this with a hearty dose of some sesame seeds. You do not have to do this part. You can leave it just plain. I just kind of think these make a beautiful picture. And they taste really delicious when you go to bite into it. So this is still going to rise a bit in the oven. So I'll make sure I put a nice amount on there. Okay. All right, and as you heard, my oven is preheated and ready to go. So in this goes, and I will bring you back when it's all finished. Of course, we're temping this to make sure that the center of the loaf reaches 190 degrees Fahrenheit. And we definitely got that. So look how pretty this is. I'm gonna let this just cool just a little bit on the paper here, and then I'll transfer it onto the wire rack to finish cooling, and then we can slice into it, and I'll let you take a look. Look how soft and pillowy this bread really is. It's just, and it smells incredible. I'm gonna go ahead and slice through this. Now I know traditionally you're just supposed to rip these apart and not slice it, but it just slices like butter. Look at that. Beautiful. And let's see if we wanted to do the pull apart method. So we have that beautiful strands. Just lovely. Oh, wow. That tastes incredible. I think this is going to be on our new lineup to where we're making this quite often. I hope you enjoyed making challah with me. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share with your friends, and check out my blog at grainsandsmallplaces.net, where you can find this recipe and a whole bunch of other fresh milled flour recipes. And thank you for stopping by Grains and Small Places. Goodbye.